Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So this video is going to be about how to get your party back to full health in between combats. But before we even get started, what I should say is if you have time for a short rest and you still have hit dice left, that is a great way to get your party back to full health. However, sometimes you don't have the time for a short rest, or you don't have any hit dice left or enough hit dice in order to get back to full health, so then you need another method. So what I want to talk about in this video are ways to get back to full health when you can't take a short rest. I'm going to talk about ways we used to be able to do it, but can't anymore, and ways that we can sometimes do it at lower levels, but doesn't hold out at higher levels. And I want to talk about a way that works pretty well. I think it's pretty much the best way you can do it at those mid levels that will take you right into those high levels. So let's get started. So, do you remember Healing Spirit? Like, when it was good? Yeah, when Xanathars was released 4 years ago, some players just lost their minds when they read this spell. It was a second level spell on the Druid and Ranger spell lists. I mean, I guess it still is, but the spell is a shadow of its former self. A bonus action to cast, and it used concentration, with duration of up to 1 minute. During that time, whenever a creature that you could see entered the spirit space for the first time on a turn, or started its turn there, the spell would heal a d6 hit points to that creature. If you upcast, the d6 would become 2d6, then 3d6, and so on. You could use your bonus action to move the spirit around, 30 feet at a time, so the idea was that if you had a party member go down, you would move the healing spirit to them, and then at the start of their turn, they pop back up again. In combat, the spell wasn't bad. Gave emergency healing throughout the duration, and use your concentration, but not your action. So you could do other things. But out of combat, you could pretty much heal your entire party, at least at lower levels. I mean, higher levels too, though you would need to upcast it to 3rd or 4th level, or participate in some shenanigans that were possible, depending on how much healing you had to do. And when I would talk about shenanigans, there was an exploit for even more out of combat healing. Like, what you would do is you would use grapple, and then you would drag to have the same character enter the spirit space multiple times in a round on different turns, getting multiple instances of healing. But basically, once you had the spell, you could expend the resource and get the party back to full hit points between combats. And like I said, I had never seen D&D players collectively lose their minds all at once over something like this ever before. I mean, we've seen it since with Silvery Barbs, which had a very similar reaction. There was a lot of, this spell is so broken, there's no way I would ever allow it. It gets a day 0 ban. A character with this is way too powerful. Oh, and yeah, by the way, Rangers suck. Yeah, I had that conversation lots of times. Someone would tell me that Rangers are the worst class in the game and that they really suck. And then I would say they weren't. And I would start to list things that made Rangers actually pretty decent. And I would list Healing Spirit, and they would say, Healing Spirit? I banned that on first reading. Okay, I mean, Xanathars is all optional stuff, so you should only use what you like. But if you think Rangers suck so bad, then maybe you shouldn't be banning stuff that makes them better. This is just my opinion, of course, but I found that whole mindset really confusing. Anyways, that was 2017. And I didn't ban Healing Spirit, and the groups I played with didn't ban it. And yeah, it was a great spell. Spend the resource, you get everyone back to full hit points between combats. Nice. Personally, I never considered the spell broken, but admittedly, it was really good. But I used it, and played with other players who used it, and it didn't wreck any of our games anyways, for what that's worth. During that time, there were countless house rule fixes for the spell coming out online. Even Jeremy Crawford got into the mix. Here's what he said. If Healing Spirit has felt too effective in your game, try this house rule, which holds the spell to our expectations for it. The spell ends once the spirit has restored hit points a number of times equal to twice your spellcasting ability modifier, minimum of once. Okay, so basically 10d6 for everyone gets reduced to twice your ability modifier d6s to spread around. So let's say your ranger had 16 wisdom. You expend a 2nd level slot, and you get 66 healing total, or about 21 hit points of healing. Now, considering you get 10 points of healing with a first level Goodberry spell, well, that seems, I guess, not bad. Not a great spell anymore, but still potentially worth taking, if your wisdom is good. I figured this house rule would kind of hurt rangers specifically though, because if you're a druid, you're probably treating wisdom as your primary ability score. But if you're a ranger, then more likely dexterity is your primary ability score and wisdom is secondary. So it's 16 at best, but very likely probably a 14. That's just 46 healing total. Other house rules I saw included limiting the spirit to a single d6 of healing per round, picking a target and they are the only one it can heal, removing the entering the spirit space on a turn clause so you could only get the healing at the start of your turn if you're already in the area, increasing the spell level to level 5. There were more, but those are the ones I remember. But basically, the problem players had here was we have a spell that could bring your party back to full health between combats, and they felt that was too good. There seemed to be a near consensus online that in order for combats to be challenging, player character hit points shouldn't be able to fully recover between combats, even if you're expending resources. And because Healing Spirit did that, it was therefore broken and shouldn't be in the game. The comparison was very commonly made to Prayer of Healing. You're never going to see this spell on optimized builds because it's really bad. 2d8 plus your ability score modifier with a 10-minute casting time in a second level spell slot. I mean, that just seemed like a really low bar to set. Like, I would say that maybe instead of making Healing Spirit as bad as Prayer of Healing, maybe instead Prayer of Healing should have been made better. At least, that's my opinion. But again, I was in a small minority. And the complaints were heard, and they were listened to by the game designers. Jeremy Crawford said, "We actually balance the game assuming player characters are at full health. We have to do that, since an encounter could happen at any point. An extra powerful healing spell doesn't unbalance the game, but it can disrupt what feels right to a group. That's what concerns us." Which basically boils down to, okay, we don't think healing up between combats is a problem if you're expending resources to do so, but if you do, and that's your experience, then we consider that a problem. So they changed the spell. Errata was released in 2020. This is 3 years after Xanathar's. They changed Healing Spirit so that the spell could only give that d6 healing a number of times equal to 1 plus your ability modifier, and then the spell would end. So that same ranger with a 14 wisdom would get 3d6 healing from Healing Spirit. That's the highest level spell on a 5th level ranger. 11 hit points total healing on average using concentration. Once again, I'll point out that Goodberry can heal 10 hit points between combats with a 1st level spell. It didn't hit druids quite as hard since they have higher wisdom scores, but even with a wisdom of 20, that's 66 total, or 21 points on average. And that's it. The errata was even harsher than the house rule Jeremy Crawford had proposed, and Healing Spirit all but disappeared from the game. I never hear about Healing Spirit anymore, at least at optimized tables. Not only was the spell made worse, it was made so much worse that if you wanted to heal up the party between combats, Healing Spirit was a terrible option, which brings us back to the Goodberry spell. 10 hit points of healing with a 1st level spell. This is pretty good, honestly, but it doesn't scale by using a higher level slot, and those 10 hit points end up not going very far once the party is in the double-digit levels. I mean, consider a 10th level party. After a tough fight, you may have 30 or 40 hit points to heal for each party member. That could be 200 hit points of healing needed, maybe even more. Goodberry just isn't going to do that job. Which brings us to Life Cleric. Disciple of Life provides a bonus of 2 plus the spell's level whenever you use a spell of 1st level or higher to restore hit points to a creature. So the question was, does this work with Goodberry? This was hotly debated online, and I participated in some of those debates. My opinion was it didn't work. The reason I had that opinion is that the Disciple of Life feature specifically says that it works when you use a spell to restore hit points to a creature. But the Goodberry spell doesn't directly heal anyone. It conjures something, and then those items it conjured can be used to facilitate healing. Now, the other side of the debate was generally that Goodberry is a spell, and the ultimate result of that spell is that the creature that eats the berry recovers a hit point. So even if it's not directly healing them, it's still ultimately healing them, and we are still casting it to restore hit points. So it counts. And you know what? I get that. I really do. But I'm just thinking that if we don't need to directly restore hit points, it becomes a slippery slope once you say the spell just needs to ultimately lead to hit point recovery, even if it's not direct, in order to qualify for Disciple of Life. Let me provide you some examples of what I mean. Here's the Fabricate spell. It's a 4th level spell and it allows you to convert raw materials into a product worked of those materials. So, for example, you could use it to fabricate a healing kit. A healing kit has 10 uses, and with the healer feat, you can use that healing kit to restore a d6 hit points plus the creature's hit dice plus 4. Or let's say we use the spell to fabricate a herbalism kit and then brew healing potions. And a herbalism kit doesn't have limited uses, so there's no cap on the number of healing potions we could brew with it. So the question is, do we add Disciple of Life onto all of them forever? I mean, can I just buy my healing kit or my herbalism kit, fabricated by someone with a life cleric dip, please? And then I get those huge bonuses to all my healing potions and all my healing checks with the healer's kit. We can even go further than that and get into some straight out ridiculous stuff. Like, let's say we conjure woodland beings and we summon some dryads and they cast Goodberry spells. Do those get the Disciple of Life boost? We've only added one more step of indirect healing, but ultimately our conjure woodland beings spell ended up providing healing, so we could legitimately say that we used a spell of 1st level or higher to restore hit points. And conjure woodland beings is a 4th level spell. So I guess 6 additional hit points of healing for each berry the dryads create. And we have 2 dryads with a spell, and they can each cast Goodberry 3 times. So 420 points of healing, I guess. And then we still have the dryads. I mean, it's ludicrous. And your DM would never allow it, or at least I shouldn't. But where was the line drawn? If a spell that doesn't directly recover hit points, but ultimately leads to hit point recovery qualifies, then shouldn't all spells that fit that description qualify? Or do we draw the line at 1 step of indirect hit point recovery is okay, but 2 is not okay? Okay, so let's say 1 step of indirect hit point recovery is valid, but multiple is not. Well, let's say we cast Rope Trick. This is a 2nd level spell that gives the party a safe place to short rest. So if they expand the hit dice on that short rest, do we add Disciple of Life? I guess you could say that in this case, it's not the spell actually that's restoring the hit points, but facilitating the hit point recovery. But it did ultimately lead to hit points being recovered. I mean, we're just in murky waters. Basically, my thinking is that if a spell isn't directly restoring hit points, and Goodberry doesn't, and we allow Disciple of Life to add to those indirect hit point recoveries, then where do we draw the line? I'm almost tempted to say maybe we shouldn't draw the line anywhere. But it's really possible then we could end up with some legitimately broken stuff. I mean, I came up with some pretty bad stuff there just off the top of my head. And not only that, this might not just affect Disciple of Life, but how about any feature that adds to things like spell damage? So conjure animals leads to damage. Do all the conjured animals' attacks get boosted? I think if we dive into the deep end, we can end up with problems we could have easily avoided. However, despite my opinion, when this question was asked of the designers, here's what Jeremy Crawford had to say. I realize there's not a lot of context here, as the tweet he's responding to has been removed. But the question he was answering was whether Disciple of Life would add 3 additional hit points of healing to each Goodberry. So 1 Goodberry spell would heal 40 hit points total. Now, saying I would allow it is different than saying this feature works that way. In fact, I would allow it almost sounds like he's acknowledging that it doesn't work that way, but he would let it go. But his response did make sage advice, where it says that yes, Disciple of Life adds to each Goodberry's healing amount. Now, sage advice is always suggestions and not errata, so it's not the same as changing the wording of Disciple of Life, so it works with spells that allow hit point recovery through indirect means. But I find most tables I play at follow the sage advice. And everything I've said about combining Disciple of Life with Goodberry is just my opinion. And once again, I think I'm in the minority. So if you think that Disciple of Life clearly works with Goodberry the way you read it, I am not saying you're wrong, but we just have differing opinions is all. So yeah, that's 40 hit points of out of combat healing. That is going to be tough to beat. This combination is generally referred to as Lifeberries. You get Goodberry, generally through either Druid or Ranger, though there's always things like magical secrets or feats that can give you the spell as well, and then you add a Life Cleric dip. Now, for me personally, I don't do Lifeberry, because in my opinion it shouldn't work. But I'm not telling you how to play. But I tend to police myself on things when I don't think they should work. However, I'm big on being at full hit points, or at least close to full hit points when I'm expecting a combat. So have I self-policed myself right out of healing up to full between combats? No. There is another way, though I'm not going to pretend it's a low resource cost or investment. But let's go through the process. First off, here's Aura Vitality. This is a spell I didn't pay a lot of attention to previously because originally this was a Paladin spell only, and it's 3rd level, and Paladins don't even get 3rd level spells until 9th level, though it was always a decent pick in my opinion. In a lot of ways, it's reminiscent of Healing Spirit before the errata. Heals 2d6 hit points with your bonus action for up to 10 rounds using your concentration. So a single casting of the spell should restore 20d6 hit points. That's 70 hit points of healing total on average. And you can spread that out between multiple people. In theory, a 9th level Paladin should be pretty much able to heal themselves or someone else up to full hit points even if they took a lot of damage after a fight. It's basically as good as 7 castings of Goodberry. However, I wouldn't count on it to get a whole party up to full hit points, at least around 9th level. I think at lower levels it can. But, I mean, if a significant amount of damage was taken and your party is like 9th level or 10th level, I think you'll probably find that it's a fair bit more than 70 hit points total. However, one thing I am sure of is Aura Vitality for sure works with Disciple of Life whenever you use a spell of 1st level or higher to restore hit points to a creature, and you're using a spell in your bonus action to directly restore hit points. So yeah, it definitely works with Disciple of Life. And since Aura Vitality is a 3rd level spell, that means each time we use our bonus action to heal someone 2d6 damage, it becomes 2d6 plus 5. So instead of 70 hit points of healing, now we're healing 120. So now we're actually doing quite well. But we can actually double that amount without expending additional spell slots. We just need a single sorcery point. Here's Extend Spell. When you cast a spell that has a duration of 1 minute or longer, you can spend 1 sorcery point to double its duration to a maximum of 24 hours. So Aura Vitality has a 1 minute duration, so we expand a sorcery point, and now it has a 2 minute duration, during which, on each of our turns, we can use a bonus action to hand out 2d6 plus 5 healing. So that ends up being 40d6 plus 100 hit points of healing with a 3rd level spell and 1 sorcery point. On average, that's going to be 240 hit points, 8 times the hit point recovery of Lifeberry, and it works without the iffy interaction. More than triple the healing of a heal spell, which is a 6th level spell, and about half the healing of a mass heal 9th level spell. That's definitely going to get moderate level parties back to full hit points between combats, no problem. Now it's a higher level spell than Healing Spirit, and we do have to spend that sorcery point if we want the 240 hit points of healing. We can actually get more out of it without any additional expenditure. Here's Gift of the Ever-Living Ones. This is a Warlock invocation, and it requires you to be a Pact of the Chain Warlock. Whenever you regain hit points while your familiar is within 100 feet of you, treat any dice rolled to determine the hit points you regain as having rolled their maximum value. So that 2d6 roll each round becomes an automatic 12 or 17 with the Life Cleric dip. Now, this only affects healing on yourself. But still, in theory, that's 340 hit points of healing. Not that you're ever going to need that much for yourself. But when you need a lot of healing for everyone, it means less of the spell is going to be used on yourself, so you will get more out of it altogether. So here's the question. If you want to create a character that can do this in between combat healing, but still be able to contribute effectively in combat, you need Aura Vitality, of course, but you also need Metamagic and Sorcery points, enough spell slots to use this between fights, and yet still be able to contribute effectively in combat. And, oh, by the way, we'll need that cleric dip as well. So what would such a build look like? Well, guess what my next video will be. I will show you how to make the build, and she's going to keep the rest of the party alive forever. I hope you'll join me for that. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.